Diddy's ex-assistant exposed what she was forced to cover up for 10 years. Viewer guidance is advised. The following content is intended purely for informational and entertainment purposes. The courtroom was already tense on day 12 of the Diddy trial, but everything shifted the moment the name Amelia Richardson was called. Legal teams were arranging their files, reporters quietly reviewing notes, and spectators whispered among themselves. But when her name echoed through the chamber, the atmosphere turned electric. Security tightened instantly. Phones were rechecked at the door. Even the judge straightened up. It was clear something major was about to unfold. Amelia Richardson had been invisible for nearly a decade. From 2004 to 2014, she worked as Diddy's executive assistant, managing everything from his calendar to his most private matters. She never gave interviews. She never made headlines. After leaving in 2014, she vanished into ordinary life. Yet now she was stepping onto the witness stand, dressed in a simple navy suit, her expression unreadable. No theatrics. Just quiet resolve. Diddy, who had kept a calm and collected posture throughout the trial, immediately tensed. His attorney placed a hand on his arm, a subtle warning to stay composed. This testimony was a complete surprise. The prosecution had never mentioned her. She was never listed as a witness. Her appearance was a strategic move designed for maximum impact. As she was sworn in, the courtroom fell silent. She adjusted the microphone, her hands steady under pressure. When asked her former role, she answered clearly. She was Sean Combs's executive personal assistant for 10 years. She managed his schedule, his household staff, his travel plans, and his personal affairs. When asked what those personal matters included, she finally looked at Diddy and said, everything he needed to keep hidden. The courtroom held its breath. Richardson then revealed she had brought with her a flash drive containing 10 years of digital records, emails, receipts, photos, calendar entries. Evidence she had meticulously preserved. This was not the testimony of a bitter ex-employee. This was a decade of documented activity. She stated that she was not there for attention or money. She had been subpoenaed and chose to comply because, in her words, it was time the truth came out. The judge nodded. The jury leaned forward. Diddy's lawyers began scribbling furiously. Richardson explained how her role evolved. At first, she performed typical assistant duties. But over time, she became responsible for what the team called special situations, problems that needed to disappear. In 2006, she was asked to manage a situation at Diddy's Miami residence. A guest had become extremely intoxicated and was threatening to talk to the tabloids about what she had witnessed at a private party. Richardson was told to take care of it. She arranged for private security to escort the guest out. She negotiated a financial settlement in exchange for an NDA. She deleted photos and videos from the guest's phone. She even created a cover story, painting the guest as unstable and aggressive. Diddy was impressed. He gave her a significant bonus and expanded her responsibilities. From that point forward, Richardson became the fixer. The person who made problems go away before they reached the legal team. She described it as being the first line of defense for issues too sensitive for standard channels. The prosecution presented an employment contract addendum from 2006. It included unusual confidentiality clauses and a salary increase. Richardson confirmed it was real. She said it was made clear that signing it was mandatory if she wanted to keep her job. The courtroom listened as she described the systematic effort to protect Diddy's image. Richardson had developed protocols to manage damage control. The first step was to secure the location, confiscate phones, cameras, anything that could record. Second, identify all witnesses and separate them. Third, decide containment strategies based on the person's connection to Diddy. A document was shown on the courtroom screen, a flowchart of containment strategies. Richardson confirmed she had created it as a personal reference. High-value contacts were promised future opportunities or investments. Professionals were offered career advancement or threatened with blacklisting. Civilians received cash settlements paired with restrictive NDAs. She maintained a database to track payments and monitor compliance. She flagged anyone who seemed like a repeat concern, someone who had seen too much or resisted the containment plan. Another document was introduced, the watch list. Names of people who were considered ongoing liabilities. It included celebrities, music industry figures, and former employees. The courtroom murmured at the names. Richardson explained how things escalated after 2010. Certain parties hosted by Diddy had different protocols: no staff allowed in private rooms, guests required to surrender phones, and off-record medical assistance arranged when needed. Doctors were always bound by strict confidentiality. One incident in 2012 stood out. A young woman needed medical help after one of these gatherings. She told Richardson she had been pressured to take unfamiliar substances and couldn't remember the night. Richardson reported this to Diddy. His only concern was whether the NDA had been signed before or after the substances were administered. When told it was signed beforehand, he said, "Good. Get her treated and get her out." The prosecution displayed a redacted medical invoice. Richardson identified it and noted it was billed to a subsidiary company used for sensitive expenses that wouldn't link back to Diddy. The young woman was given a development deal that never materialized. She was relocated and placed on what they called the maintenance program, regular payments through a third party to ensure silence. Richardson continued her testimony, explaining that what she had been part of wasn't just reactive cleanup. It was a fully developed infrastructure designed to prevent problems before they even began. This system protected Diddy's image at every level. His properties were fitted with advanced surveillance, not just for security, but to monitor guests and staff. Everyone who came near his world, from caterers to maintenance workers, had to sign non-disclosure agreements. She described 3 tiers of these NDAs. Basic agreements for everyday employees, intermediate versions for business associates, and the most restrictive ones for those exposed to sensitive situations. These comprehensive agreements included clauses that went far beyond confidentiality. They required people to provide supportive statements if needed, to deny specific events even under questioning, and to immediately notify Diddy's team if contacted by law enforcement or the media. The prosecutor presented several versions of these agreements, and Richardson confirmed their authenticity. She said the enforcement of these agreements was backed by both rewards and punishments. Those who showed loyalty were rewarded: access to elite circles, career opportunities, expensive gifts. But those who hesitated were quickly sidelined. She gave examples of how people would suddenly find themselves excluded from meetings, reassigned to less favorable projects, or simply removed from the inner circle without explanation. Richardson then revealed something called the leverage file. She described it as a collection of compromising or sensitive information about people in Diddy's orbit. She was tasked with keeping it updated. It included notes about financial stress, relationship troubles, substance abuse, or anything else that could be used as a pressure point. While this information was rarely used directly, the knowledge that it existed was enough to keep most people compliant. By 2013, Richardson said she was becoming increasingly uneasy about her role. At first, she told herself she was just being diligent, documenting everything for work purposes. But in truth, she admitted, she was protecting herself. She started backing up emails, taking photos of physical documents, and keeping private records of meetings and transactions. As she became less willing to carry out certain tasks, she noticed the same tactics being used against her that she had once helped implement. She was excluded from decision-making, kept out of the loop, and made to feel disposable. It became clear to her that she was only valued as long as she was useful. Once she started questioning things, she became a threat. The turning point came in December 2013. Richardson arrived at Diddy's Hamptons residence the morning after a private event. The house was in chaos. Security was acting on edge. She was directed to a guest suite where a young woman appeared visibly bruised and disoriented. The woman had been invited under the pretense of meeting music producers. Instead, she ended up at a private gathering where she was pressured to consume substances. Her memory of the night was fractured, and she was clearly traumatized. This time, Richardson said, she didn't follow protocol. She didn't take the woman's phone. She didn't write a statement. Instead, she called a friend of the woman to pick her up. She gave the woman her personal number and told her that if she ever decided to come forward, she would support her account. The courtroom fell silent as she shared this moment. Richardson said Diddy was furious when he found out. He wasn't angry because the woman had been harmed. He was angry because Richardson had broken the containment process. He reminded her of her contractual obligations and threatened her career. He warned her that he could make sure she never worked in the industry again. At that moment, Richardson realized she had to get out. Over the next few weeks, she pretended to return to her regular duties, all while carefully collecting and securing critical documentation. She created encrypted backups, stored key files off-site, and consulted a lawyer in private to understand her legal position. In February 2014, she submitted her resignation, citing family obligations and burnout. She gave the standard 2 weeks' notice, trained her replacement, and left quietly. The prosecutor asked if there had been efforts to keep her silent after she left. Richardson confirmed there had been. Shortly after her departure, she was offered a lucrative consulting contract. It required minimal work but came with a clear expectation: continued loyalty. When she declined, the tone changed. Someone from Diddy's security network paid her a visit. It wasn't a threat, exactly, but a strong reminder of the mutual destruction that would come from any violation of confidentiality. Richardson left the entertainment industry altogether. She moved to a different state, started over in a new field, and maintained a low profile. She didn't talk to the press. She didn't respond to inquiries. She effectively vanished. But in 2024, the subpoena changed everything. Richardson explained that the legal order gave her a legitimate reason to break her silence. More importantly, she said, seeing other victims come forward made her realize that her silence was enabling continued harm. The systems she helped build were still operating. Others were still being silenced. And she could no longer justify her inaction. The prosecutor stepped back, letting the weight of her words settle across the courtroom. Richardson's calm but detailed testimony had peeled back the curtain on more than just a celebrity scandal. She had revealed the architecture of a protection machine, one that had allowed damaging behavior to continue unchecked for years. The courtroom reconvened after a brief recess. Amelia Richardson returned to the stand with the same composed demeanor, though there was now a visible sense of relief on her face. The heaviest parts of her testimony were behind her, but the prosecutor still had more to uncover. He began by asking what ultimately led her to leave Diddy's employment after 10 years. Richardson took a breath and adjusted her glasses. She explained that a series of events in late 2013 had become harder and harder to reconcile with her conscience. The final incident, the one she had already described at the Hamptons residence, was the breaking point. It was no longer about moral discomfort. It was about survival. The prosecutor then guided her through more details of the systems she had maintained. Richardson explained that nothing in Diddy's world happened by accident. There was a deliberate infrastructure built to monitor, contain, and silence. Surveillance systems tracked staff movements. Communication protocols ensured that no one spoke out. Even housing arrangements were structured to maintain control. Many employees lived in properties owned by Diddy or his affiliates, giving his team full visibility into their private lives. She confirmed that bonuses were often tied to silence. She recalled instances where someone would be paid significantly after a sensitive situation had been successfully contained. She noted that payments were sometimes disguised as consulting fees, talent development deals, or partnership contracts, all routed through subsidiaries or third-party entities to maintain distance from Diddy's name. The prosecutor asked if there were other victims who had received similar treatment. Richardson said yes, although she could not speak for all of them. She remembered names, faces, situations. But not everyone had spoken to her openly. Many people, she believed, had been paid off, relocated, or intimidated into silence. Some had even stayed willingly, believing it was a fair trade for access, fame, or money. When asked whether she had ever tried to report what was happening while still employed, she shook her head. She said that within the environment created around Diddy, there was no safe path to whistleblowing. Anyone who questioned the system was either cut off or discredited. She had seen it happen to others. She knew what it would cost. The prosecutor concluded his direct examination with one final question: why now? Richardson responded that the subpoena gave her legal justification, but it was more than that. She said watching others finally speak out made her realize that every time she stayed silent, she was reinforcing the very system that had caused so much harm. She could no longer separate herself from it by pretending she was just an employee following orders. Diddy's lead defense attorney then stepped up for cross-examination. His tone was sharp, but controlled. He questioned her credibility, pointing out that she had remained employed for a decade, accepted raises and bonuses, and only came forward when subpoenaed. Richardson didn't flinch. She admitted she had compromised for too long. She said she wasn't claiming to be a hero. She was simply ready to tell the truth. The attorney suggested her documentation could be selective or taken out of context. Richardson replied that the materials included full email chains, complete meeting notes, and unedited photographs, all with timestamps and corroboration. She said she knew such questions would come, which is why she had taken care to preserve the full context. He presented performance reviews and bonus memos praising her discretion. Didn't that prove she was an active participant, not a reluctant one? She agreed. She had been good at her job. She had rationalized her actions as standard industry practice. But over time, the justifications wore thin. She wasn't denying her role, she was owning it. Then the defense shifted to motive. Had she been approached for book deals, interviews, or documentaries? Was she profiting from this testimony? Richardson said she had declined all offers. Her attorney had documented those rejections. She emphasized that testifying came with risk, not reward. It jeopardized her current life, her safety, and her future employment. She was here because staying silent had become unbearable. The defense attorney changed tactics again, suggesting she might be facing legal risk herself. Was she cooperating in exchange for immunity? Richardson said no, she had not been promised immunity. She knew her testimony could open her up to legal consequences. But protecting the system any longer, she said, would be worse than facing the fallout. The cross-examination dragged on for nearly 2 hours. Throughout, Richardson remained poised. She corrected inaccuracies, admitted when she didn't know something, and never wavered on the substance of her claims. Finally, in a last effort to discredit her, the defense presented a string of cordial emails she had exchanged with Diddy after her resignation, birthday wishes, polite check-ins, and friendly remarks. The attorney asked how someone traumatized could maintain such contact. Richardson looked directly at Diddy, then back at the attorney. She said one word: survival. She explained that when someone spends years in a system built on control and image, smiling and playing along becomes second nature. Those emails, she said, weren't contradictions. They were evidence of how deeply the manipulation ran. The defense had no further questions. As Richardson stepped down from the witness stand, the courtroom remained still. There was no shuffling of papers. No whispered chatter. Even the judge seemed momentarily frozen. Diddy sat motionless, his confident exterior now visibly fractured. His attorney scribbled frantic notes. The impact of the testimony was undeniable. Outside the courthouse, news of Richardson's statements spread fast. Legal experts called it a turning point in the case. What she had exposed was not just about misconduct. It was about an entire system, an operation that functioned to protect one man at all costs. Entertainment law firms began reviewing their NDA policies. Agencies held emergency meetings. Advocacy hotlines reported increased calls. And more former employees started to come forward. Not all with accusations, but many confirming the operational details she described. For Diddy, the legal danger expanded. Richardson's records weren't rumors or hearsay. They were real-time documentation from inside his world. Financial logs, travel records, calendar invites, surveillance reports. The foundation of a possible racketeering case was now on the table. As day 12 of the trial closed, the judge issued warnings against witness intimidation and reminded the public that social media attacks would be taken seriously. The atmosphere around the trial had shifted. Richardson had pulled back the curtain not just on Diddy, but on the machinery that enabled him. What happens next remains to be seen.